Hello, welcome to this video. I have a potent message that I would like to share with us today. And if you've been following along with my Instagram stories, then you know that I've been having a very difficult time bringing this message through with technology. So let's see what happens this time around. And let's just dive into it. So this video is going to be on Hollywood, and we're going to break down how Hollywood and the nightlife scene really serves to exploit women and is actually harvesting that feminine energy to feed this entire system. So first off, let's go into Hollywood a little bit. So Hollywood, there's a tree. I always try to remember what tree it was, and I even tried to look it up and I couldn't find it because it's one of those like hidden knowledge things. But there's like the holly, maybe it's a holly tree, but the wood stick is essentially like the magic wand. And so Hollywood is kind of like this dark magic place, and I'll explain why. And the reason I want to share this is because I spent a really good chunk of my, most formative years from like when I turned 19, I started clubbing in Hollywood, and I didn't fully exit the scene until maybe like when I was 24 or something like that. So, but a good time between like 19 and 21 and 22 was when I was a very local Hollywood goer. So LA, of course. So LA, Los Angeles, it's actually subconsciously the Lost Angels. So everything, of course, has an inversion, whether it's, dark into light, light into dark. And of course, there's never like one or the other. There's no like good or evil. It's just kind of like a mix of the two. And it's the predominant energy that is in one of those spaces. And so when I think of LA, I don't think like, oh, everyone is so angelic and everyone is so sweet. I think like there is this energy that causes people to behave in a certain way, and it's not light. It's actually the opposite of light, and it's actually harvesting light. So another thing too about LA, and of course Hollywood too, with like so many movies, so many TV shows, reality TV, the Kardashians are in LA, The Hills, like Laguna Beach, all these shows that we grew up watching. Maybe not Laguna Beach obviously, but it's still like in that general area. And so it serves as an influence to our society. And a lot of trends actually start in Hollywood. Like I remember there being vegan restaurants, like vegan only places, and let's just say in LA. So like I remember like Silver Lake, Santa Monica, like these areas where there was just like a lot of vegan influence. And so it led to, a lot of people going vegan because it was easier to do so in these areas. And now, we can each have our own belief system around it, and of course like make your own choices with what you desire to put into your body. But for me, veganism actually led me down to have a lot of gut issues. It definitely weakened my gut biome, and so I've been spending this past year rebuilding that. And if it happened for me, I'm sure there's others. Of course, I'm sure there's others who thrive on a vegan diet. If that's you, take what resonates, leave the rest. Let's talk about the actual club scene, like the nightlife scene. So Hollywood is very similar to Vegas, except for I always felt like because I started out in Hollywood, like I got very spoiled, because by the time I went to Vegas, I was like, this is weak. Like this isn't even that good. And that's because the Hollywood scene is, it's like a network, obviously. And the network is held down by promoters. And so what are promoters? Promoters are these guys who work for bigger companies, who get hired out by the clubs to bring in people. So who are the people that they're bringing in? They're bringing in women, because obviously where women are, that's where men want to be too, and that's where men want to spend money. And so the promoters have this unique job of growing this network of women and then bringing women around them, and then whoever their client is that night. You know, they have clients from all over the world. Maybe you have a guy from Dubai, maybe you have, or like a group of guys, you know. So it's very much kind of seen as this like hip, cool place, because if you're a guy with money, you're essentially going into this realm where you can pay for female attention, and it's very undercover. It's not so much like prostitution, you know, where you're obviously paying the woman directly, and so you're getting a service out of it. It's very different because on the surface it's all glitz and glamour. It's like, oh, you're gonna, you know, have this fancy table right next to the DJ at this cool club in Hollywood, and there's like naturally just gonna be all these women who are like throwing themselves at you, but it's really just because of the infiltration that they do on the female mind. And that's not to say that it's all bad. Like when I got into clubbing, I got into it because I had friends who were promoters from like high school and stuff like that. And so we would meet up in the Valley. That's where I'm from. It's like 30 minutes north of Hollywood. And so we would meet up in the Valley where we all lived, take like a giant limo, go to the club. And with promoters, you don't have to wait in line or anything. You just get straight into the club. You don't have to pay. Like it's all covered because essentially they have these clients and they work for this company. And so when I was like initially entering the scene, it was like, oh my gosh, this is the most fun thing ever. Like imagine like a house party but times like 55, you know, like you're just surrounded by like celebrities, you're surrounded by cool cars, there's really good music, like it's just a very fun scene. And so a lot of women get into this because like, you know, it's so cool, and we're just so lucky to be women and to be able to, you know, receive this kind of thing. But it's also very unfair to the real men, like the real divine masculines, because they're not necessarily allowed into the scene. So they either have to pay their way in, you know, be one of the clients who's willing to drop like $100,000 at a club, or be a promoter themselves, in which case they're no longer divine masculine because these promoters take advantage of women. And, you know, it's just kind of what it is. I've worked a lot on like the victimizing mindset behind it, because you know once you wake up from it, it's easy to be like, oh my gosh, I was preyed on, I was like being like I was in like a black magic spell, and like it's easy to get very angry about it. But ultimately, you know, like I chose to be there because I was having a good time, and my intuition knew that something didn't always feel 100% right, but you know, I still partook in it anyways. So there's no need to like, you know, necessarily feel super bad, but I'll relate it into like the more energetic part of it later on as well, with this dream that I had that kind of like amplified it all, and it made it very clear for me to see what's really happening. So it is really kind of an attack on the masculine because they're not allowed in. And so what happens to these men is their values kind of shift. So like our old friends, like, you know, in the Valley would be like, oh, do you guys want to like come over and play beer pong at my parents' house, you know? And we'd be like, play beer pong at their parents' house, or go see EC Twins at Supper Club and dance on stage, and like, you know, just have all this like stuff like thrown at you, you know? And so it was very easy for us to put that Hollywood lifestyle up on a pedestal and prefer to do that than to do, you know, more homey things, even though now looking back, it's like, yeah, I mean, I'd rather be at the beer pong or like at a kickback, not necessarily drinking, but like just at like a smaller gathering, because there's just so much more that you receive from those more intimate spaces. And even that, I mean, obviously is flawed as well. So this is the way it works. So when you're meeting up with a promoter, you meet up with them at a restaurant or a bar. And so they're kind of like almost like herding the cattle. They bring in all these girls. Also, obviously before this, they're like texting you like, hey, come out with us, we're gonna go do this. Like they make it sound like so fun and cool, and obviously you feel that it is fun and cool, and so you're like, come on girls, like let's go. And so you get out there, you're at this bar or whatever. Oftentimes they try to choose a place that's like walking distance to the club, but if not, then they'll have like a limo ready to take you to the club with them, and it just feels like very glamorous. Of course, once you arrive at the club, there's like a million people waiting in line, and all you have to do is just like walk straight in. Now, I started clubbing, like I said, when I was 19. So at 19, obviously it's not legal for me to be in these 21 and over establishments. I had a fake ID, but even when I didn't, like when I had it taken away or whatever happened with it, there were always like designated bouncers that you would know would allow you to still come in as long as you slip them a 20. But it's kind of like they still want younger women there. And so this is what really stuck out to me with everything that's happening in the spiritual community lately, because there's been a lot of talk about, oh, like women, like younger women are more pure, younger women are more like desirable to men because they haven't been like used and abused like 25-year-old women have. And that is just like so sad that we are reverting to this in a spiritual community of all places, because women, when we're super young, we're just naive. And so essentially what they're saying is they prefer naive women. They prefer women who are more willing to put out for them, or go to their like fancy parties and like hang out with them and stuff like that. And this is why you see a lot of this in those crowds, like with people like Dan Bilzerian. Like you always see him with like 20 girls around him, and they look like they're barely 20 years old, like they're so young. But this is what happens, you know, they prey on that younger feminine because she is more likely to go along with what they want her to go along with. So anyways, you get into the club, you know, the club is super fun, there's loud music, there's dancing. It's very interesting too, looking at the younger generations, because like as I stopped clubbing and then would just go like once in a while maybe, I would totally see the difference in these younger girls. They're more on their phone, they're more likely to, you know, just have this like perfect appearance, like just they look so good, like they're like dressed to the tens, their body is perfect. Their hair is like probably fake. I don't know. They all have like fake lashes. They probably have plastic surgery done. And this is another thing that really stood out to me, is that it makes women very competitive. So being in this environment where there's way more women than there is men, it's like, you know, the men's like dream come true is like, oh my gosh, like I'm just in this sea of women and they all want me, like that kind of energy. And so women start to look at other women as competition, and they start to hate on other women, and that's like really unnatural. I think that women, like naturally, we are sisters, and we want to be there for each other, we want to support each other, we want to defend one another, like, you know, like we are a tribe. But in this distorted reality, it just feels like, oh, like don't be looking at my man, like I'm trying to get with this guy, I'm trying to, you know, get these benefits out of this lifestyle. Because also it's like certain women, we were lucky because we became friends with these promoters, and so they like didn't really try to do much with us. Maybe their friends did, but you know, they were pretty respectful of us because we were friends. But I saw the way that they saw other women, and it was like, oh, like that girl is a tease, or like that girl isn't into me or whatever. And so then they would just like block them like in their mind and just like ghost them, not invite them out. And obviously a lot of these women too move to LA for their career. They either want to be an actress or a model, or they want to be in some kind of entertainment industry, maybe a singer or something like that, you know. So these women already are more vulnerable because they moved to LA alone. And so when they meet these guys, they're like excited, they want to go out, they want to like be networking essentially, like in the nightlife. And then it's like, if they don't, you know, give off the vibes that these guys are seeking, then they're just going to be out. And then the real danger comes in the after parties, because that is, I feel like, energetically where like the real predator comes out in these men, because they've been partying with these girls. It's almost like they meet these girls, they bring them out, and it's almost like an interview process. Like they kind of want to see, what is this girl like? Is she fun? And fun, obviously, by their standards, is like kind of slutty. Like, is she like wild and she's gonna be like dancing with me? Is she gonna like wanna do more with me than just dance? And so, and everybody knows that this is the case. Like in Hollywood, it's not like, oh, 2 a.m. like club closes, everybody goes home. No, these guys who are the clients who have these tables, and then also like a lot of these guys that are friends with the promoters have money, and so they have like these nice ass like mansions in the Hollywood Hills or Beverly Hills. And so you usually, hop in a limo with all of them, and it's like this fun vibe, and then you just go to the after party. And that's where things get a little weird, because that's where there's, not as much supervision. You're no longer in like a public arena. There's like beds, there's closed off rooms. And so I think a lot of women end up getting sucked into this whole thing of like, oh, this guy has provided so much for me, so like, how do I give back to him? And same thing with the clients, even during the club at the table, you're very much inclined to, want to talk to them, stroke their ego, like give them some attention, because obviously they're providing this whole experience for you to be there. So it's just this very weird thing. And the dark side definitely comes out of after parties, because then there's drugs at after parties. I mean, there's drugs inside the clubs too, but there's more even drugs at the after parties. There's of course temptations of like drinking more, taking your clothes off, swimming in the pool, like like whatever. And I don't judge, like women were naturally like wild, like we want to unleash that wild side. But I think there's a big difference between unleashing the wild when you feel like grounded and you feel like this is the right thing to do, like you naturally feel open, versus when you're synthetically primed to feel this way, where it's just like, this is just how it is, like women, like Dan Bilzerian's girls, going back to that example, like I don't think they like sit around and knit, obviously, like when they're there, they're just like wild and crazy, but it's like how much of that is actually organic and how much of it is because of who you're around and who is essentially paying for you to be there, like who provides the space, who provides these drugs and this alcohol. And so I think this is a good point to talk about my dream. So last December, I moved out of LA, and I had this dream. And it's very interesting too that it happened after I was already out of LA. But I had this dream where there was like this big building with like different rooms, and this man was leading me through the building. He was like, "Come on, let's go, like let's go meet up with our group." And so as we were walking through, I already kind of got the vibe that this was like a promoter type of guy, like like a friend who's bringing you in to be consumed by this energy. So he was walking me through the rooms, and instantly like my vision just started getting really hazy. I just felt really out of it, and every room was slightly different. Like it had a different vibe, had a different theme going on. And like as I was looking around, it was kind of like creepy, where women were kind of like passed out. Like it was very like odd. He takes me to the actual room that we're gonna be in, and like hands me drinks and stuff, and there's other people there. Mind you, I've been out of this scene since 2015, 2016, let's say 2016. But that's like what, 6 years? Or I guess at this point it was 5 years, but it's like now I'm having this dream. Very weird. So he takes me through to like where our crew is at. And so I'm there, I'm just like still feeling very hazy, like nothing is like clear. And I instantly got that vibe of like, oh, like this is dark, like I am about to be used, like something weird is happening here. So I was like, oh, like I'm just gonna go outside. So I walk outside to like get fresh air. And trigger warning, there are women all around the outside of this building, and they're chained to the building, like chained on their hands, on their feet. they're all like very weak, they seem like drugged, and I was just like to do something, and like I instantly just sobered up being outside of that thing. So I don't know like what they were pumping through the air or whatever. But so I started like going up to these women and I'm like, I'm gonna get you out, I'm gonna get you out. And they were just like so out of it. And I think I went and like tried to get like weapons or something. Like this whole thing happened. And then the promoter caught up with me and he was like, no, you have to come back inside, like all this stuff. And so I ended up waking up, but I just had this like dark, heavy feeling on my chest, and I was like, this is what they're doing to the feminine, and this is what happens to women whether they realize it or not. And I'm here to say, like, I was there too. There's no shame in being under that black magic spell, because when I first went into it, it was all about luxury and the fun and the bright lights and the shininess, like, and eventually it became this darker thing where I was like, I feel like I have to drink in order to be here. Like, I feel like I have to give my energy, and it just became this pattern for me that I just lived with, because I thought that this was normal. I thought that this was, like I had made it, because our society trains us to think that these places and having the nice cars, having the nice houses, having people over, having the abundance of party favors and drugs and stuff, like it really like heightens that. And so a lot of people think that this is you making it, being in the scene. And I just witnessed how sad these guys were. Like, yeah, you have so much money, but you're having to pay for all of us to be here. Like, no one would even know that you existed if it wasn't for this scene. And so it was just a very dark thing. And having that dream, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is what the energy is. And part of what my message is here is just to, one, like have compassion, because so many good girls end up in this system just because like they don't know any better, and then before they know it, it's too late. Not to mention some of them are like, very, very attractive. And so modeling agencies will throw contracts at them. Actually, they just become like, a pawn in this matrix of just like, this is my job. And then they get thrown like all this money, all this stuff to be in this role. But deep down, it feels so empty. And I think they all know, but they keep trying to change things about themselves, because again, there is that competitive thing. So when you see another woman making more money than you, or signing better deals than you, or getting more attention than you, then your emotional body is triggered. Your pain body really is activated. All those insecurities from childhood, from middle school, from high school, like from those teenage years, all those insecurities come up. And so these women start to think that they have to change more about themselves, which is the biggest lie ever, because women should be the choosy ones. Like, women, we are the ones who birth worlds through our wombs. We're the ones who bring babies, who bring life into this world. Like, we are, that dance between the underworld, like the unknown, and this current world. And so what a brilliant strategy for a way to dumb down an entire society and bring out this insecure version of the feminine, than by like throwing, it's kind of like the whole Pavlov conditioning thing with dogs. It's like, oh, like you reward a dog when he does something good. So it's like women and the feminine essence are being rewarded for changing things about themselves. They're being rewarded for competing, really. And so it brings out this energy in women, and it's just really sad, honestly. And the other part of my message is really just like, how do we change this in our culture? How do we go from where we are back into where we need to be? And this is honestly one thing that I've been really navigating this year too, especially from moving out of LA. I now live in Arizona. It's very different, but it still has a lot of that same feel, and that's because like, the trends might have started in LA, but they spread everywhere. Every like major city, of course, like has like these big clubs and these big nightlife scenes, and it's just what it is, and so to pull ourselves out, we really need to pull our energy out of these systems. We need to either cut ties with these people, like these promoters and stuff. Obviously, I'm not friends with any of them anymore. Also, like people that drag you into those scenes, because it's not healthy. But then, of course, like the feminine spirit, like I said, like we want to be wild, but we want to be wild in a safe space. So going to different kinds of events, like kava bars maybe, or going to shows, where like the energy is balanced. There's none of this like promoter, like be at this table, be at that table thing, and really start to build this new, rather than being stuck in their old world of like, well, this is the funnest thing, that's going on. Like I have so many friends too who still go to these like massive concerts. There's so much energy harvesting in these concerts, and if you're there, if you're giving your energy, you are consenting. And so we really have to take ourselves out of those and start to really sit with it and be like, well, what do we want to see? I personally want to start planning ecstatic dance events because I love ecstatic dance. It's just so fun. The reason why I love the club scene so much is because I love to dance, and what better like environment to dance in at the time, at least, than in this in this space of just like loud music and cool DJs and other people who want to dance and cool outfits and all of that. But now it's like that is so generic to me. Like I want to find my own style. I want to find my own way of dancing and my own way of having fun. And I know that I'm not the only one in this. Like all of us who have been in this system, which is probably the majority of us, because it's like it's like basically what happens. And this is also why I'm actually very against college now, because as much as I'm so grateful, don't get me wrong, like I met some of the most amazing people in college. I got so much out of my college experience, but ultimately what it taught me is how to bullshit and how to party hard and how to, be up until 4 a.m. and then go land a job interview the next day and we're good. College is kind of like those priming grounds that teaches us how to assimilate into the system, because once you graduate, then you're like, oh, well, now I lost this big party side of me, which is part of me. Like we start to really identify with the party as being our form of expression, our form of having fun, having a good time. And so then we automatically seek out bars and clubs. Of course, the common denominator in all of this is the alcohol. It is that scene. And even in college too, it's like there's frats, same thing as a promoter type of energy. It's like there's these chosen men who are allowed to be around the women, and the other men, like you either join us or you're not with us. And so the other men kind of start to feel ashamed of that. And so they either like work super hard to be able to afford being a client of these things, or they end up just becoming one of these promoters. And again, I don't want to keep saying it's really sad, but it just touches my heart. And I think this is why this video actually took me a while to put out, because my message was a little more on the angry side before, where I just felt like we were so taken advantage of, and I was still kind of feeling into some of that victimizer of, like this was done to us. But gotta always take responsibility. That is our only way to evolve and to collect these soul fragments and to really bring them back and hold them close and be like, it's gonna be okay. Like you learn so much through these experiences. And of course, if there is trauma there, if there is darker energies, darker emotions, or emotions that you hid away, maybe your shadow self, like just bring them to the surface. Like don't be afraid, because these are all organic. These are parts of you. And some of them might not be organic, there might be some artificial intelligence working through you that told you like keep having more drinks or whatever, and so with that, it's really just about clearing, removing all that is not us, coming back to what is us, and having fun in a healthier way. And it doesn't have to look like, you're never going to touch alcohol again, you're never going to see another drug again. Although I feel like, ultimately that is the only way, because all these things tend to disconnect us from our hearts. And when we're just operating in our mind, we become like very masculine. And women were never meant to be masculine. Women were meant to expand out through the heart. If anything, we're meant to like touch other men, which is, I think, subconsciously what a lot of these men are really seeking, is that intimacy, that like that vulnerability of like, oh, this woman is creating a safe space for me to release. But because the women are, you know, so disconnected from the heart, they're becoming so masculine. It's like a man being with another man, and in which case there's, you know, almost no balance. And so the women are like, you know, just like, oh, like toughen up, man, or like, you know, they just don't create the atmosphere for these guys to open up and to maybe even heal. And I'm not saying it's our job to heal them either. There's so many nuances in this whole topic too, so I hope you don't take everything I say as like a for all whatever, but it's part of our society, and so integrating it really requires us to step into our leadership and to pull our energy out of the fallen and into creating these new systems. Like, I'd love to see some conscious clubs that are open, maybe even outdoors, that have good music but are also like freeing, and that aren't exploiting women to be at their table, you know? So I'll just end it there. I am sending you guys so much love, and if you feel like you are currently in this and you want to pull yourself out, I do soul retrieval sessions if you want to bring more of your soul back together, any of these fragments that might be split up. And yeah, just sending you so much love in everything, wherever you are on your path, on your journey, and hope this resonated.